Talking thing on. Please don't go over there. Stay right there for a minute because I want to see if I'm.
I'm just waiting for Lee. He should be on shortly. Lee, can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Go ahead and say that over again.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And the first item of business will be the roll call, which I'll let Colin do.
Certain? Here.
Sorry, yes, here.
Karen Clark?
We had another.
Okay, I don't think she's here. Okay. Karen Cole-Smith, Dr. Cole-Smith? Here? Okay. All right. You're muted, so I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, here.
Okay. Commissioner Cornell? Here. Dr. Hart?
She's
I don't
muted.
see Dr. Hart.
I thought she was on.
She is? Okay. I'm looking. I don't see Dr. Hart, but I can mark her here in just a minute. Dr. Labarda?
I'm here.
Dr. Snyder?
Here.
Cheryl Twombly?
I'm here.
Okay. Judge Bullard?
Here.
And Chair Pinkeson here. So we have 8 members here. We have a quorum.
Okay. Okay. Just to let you know, everybody will have, the public will have multiple opportunities to speak today. And if you care to join, then you can use the chat function or you can raise your hand function in Zoom. So there will be opportunity. And when there's a motion made, we will allow the public to speak on the motion. So the first item of business would be to approve the agenda. Are there any revisions, Colin?
Not for me.
Lee, I would
Okay.
move approval of
All
the, Lee, I would move approval of the agenda. Do you want to approve the consent agenda at the same time?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so I'll move approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
Second from Bullard.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any public, any discussion from the board? Any public discussion? Is there any, Colin? Anybody raising their hand?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, all right. Member Certain?
Yes, agree.
And you said Member Clark isn't here. Member Cole Smith?
She's muted probably.
I see her.
Yes.
Okay. Member Cornell?
Yes.
Member Hart? She didn't respond before, Colin.
Yes.
Member Labarda?
Yes. And I think Dr. Hart just joined us.
Okay. Yep, I see her. Okay. Member Snyder?
Yes.
Member Twombly?
Yes.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Yes.
And I. Okay. All right. The next one will be a presentation. You want to lead in, Colin, before we hear Dr. Knopf?
No, I'd like to just turn it right over to Dr. Knopf.
Okay. Dr. Knopf, it's all yours.
Thank you. Here we go. Just let me get my screen shared here. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank you for giving us some time today on your agenda to go over the results of our work from the Technical Advisory Committee to the Children's Trust of Alachua County. As you will recall, the charge that was issued to us on February 17th was for the Technical Advisory Committee to the Children's Trust of Alachua County. Is charged with providing support to the Children's Trust of Alachua County's future strengths and needs assessment of Alachua County children ages birth to 18 by synthesizing existing reports and identify existing data and information that can and should be used in identifying community strengths and needs in important areas currently lacking comprehensive information that need additional data collection. In consultation with the Executive Director, the committee was charged to prepare and has prepared a short report of key findings regarding child and family well-being drawn from the synthesis of existing county-focused reports and provide recommendations to the Children's Trust of Alachua County regarding additional data and community perspectives that should be included in future data collection for community strengths and needs assessments. Our committee, as you will see, was constituted by a very diverse group of residents from Alachua County. We had representation from several important children and youth service agencies and organizations, as well as members of both University of Florida and Santa Fe College, serving as experts in our review and identification of data. Additional support was provided by Cindy Bishop from the Alachua County staff, Colin Murphy as the director for the Children's Trust, and Maya Schreiber, who's a graduate student working with us at the Anita Zucker Center. As a reminder, here's a framework for results-based accountability that Colin shared with the board at the last meeting that illustrates what our committee was focused on, which was first to identify the results that the Children's Trust of Alachua County might be interested in focusing on. And then we went about the task of identifying indicators that would be included in our look at baseline, but also might be tracked over time to determine whether or not we're achieving the results for children and families in Alachua County. And we've also identified a data development agenda or items and information that would be useful to get access to continue to inform the work of the board. This visual shows the different forms of accountability that are included within results-based accountability. And we have our population side, which is made up of results and then indicators that help measure and quantify the achievement of our result. And then on the right-hand side of the diagram, we have program and program performance measures that would be used to measure whether or not funded programs or programs that are operating are achieving the outcomes that they desire through their programs. Our activities for this committee constituted of bi-monthly meetings from February through May to discuss and identify a framework for meaningful results, indicators, and data that could be used by the Children's Trust Board of Directors to understand and respond to the well-being of children and families in Alachua County. During this time period, all members outside of scheduled committee meetings collected and prepared resources and data to present to the committee for potential inclusion in our final deliverable. Through our work, the committee has recommended the following results, answering the question that children in Alachua County are effectively supported when all children are born healthy and remain healthy, all children can learn what they need to be successful, all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships, and all children live in a safe community. Early in our discussion, the committee had initially identified all children are connecting with and contributing to the community as a potential additional results area. But through ongoing discussion, it became more apparent that this might be more appropriately classified as a program characteristic, where program performance data would be collected to capture information about the extent to which children are connecting with community resources and contributing to the community. Through our review of the available data and information, there are 5 key insights that our committee has identified, and this will serve as a bit of a teaser or maybe an advanced organizer for you as we're going through the specific data elements. The first is that in Alachua County, there are significant racial disparities in all results area due in part to both programmatic and structural barriers experienced by children and families in Alachua County. Second, while the percentage of children with health insurance in Alachua County is higher than our state rate, several indicators of health show a need for closer examination. For example, infant deaths, child obesity, STD rates. And so we need to look closer at the health status of children in Alachua County and the supports that may be needed. Access to quality early childhood experiences is also an issue, particularly in East Alachua County. This is reflected in maps of access and kindergarten readiness rates. Florida sponsors the voluntary pre-kindergarten program, which is a universal program for 4- and 5-year-old children, but supports for younger children are currently missing in our system. Access to information about socially and academically beneficial programs for children ages 5 to 18 is limited. Rates of youth arrested, STDs among 13 to 20-year-old teens, and continued educational disparities highlight a need for further investigation, supports, and programming. And finally, everything that we think that we know about these systems of support will be challenged due to the current public health crisis. And through this report, we're sharing indicators that the committee is recommending be tracked over time to understand children's well-being in Alachua County. And through our work, we've also located existing resources which are currently produced annually that might also be used to help track many of the recommended indicators by the Children's Trust. And these are the Children's Health Status Profile and the School-Aged Child and Adolescent Profile. I think, let me share a different screen to share an example. And this is an example of the Child Health Status Profile that shows many potential indicators, and we have identified overlap in those indicators in our report to you, but they've also categorized the county's performance by quartile, with a 1 being most favorable quartile and 4 being the least favorable quartile as you look through the indicators. So as I go through the report, indicators that have an asterisk next to them indicate that it's an indicator that's both present in our report, but it's also listed in the Department of Health profiles. Where the quartiles have been assessed, we have also included the quartile information on the slide to indicate Alachua County performance as it relates to other counties throughout the state. The first area that we'd like to review are all children are born and remain healthy. This first page shows what we're calling our dashboard indicators, or the indicators that the committee has determined are highest in their communication power, proxy power, and data power to communicate clearly to a broad base of constituents in Alachua County relating to the health of children in Alachua County. And then also within each of these results areas, we have identified additional indicators that will help provide more in-depth understanding of the health status of children in Alachua County that could help inform the story behind the data. So as we're looking at this dashboard, we see first the percentage of children in Alachua County who have health insurance versus the state of Florida averages, and is looking across 2015, 16, and 18. We see that Alachua County has a higher percentage of children who are insured. Looking at oral health, we were drawing on data from the School of Dentistry and Dr. Scott Tamar, where he has done a screening of third graders in Alachua County and found that 64.5% of those third graders screened had treated cavities, and 35.5% had untreated cavities. When we look at that untreated cavity breakdown by race, we see that white children and Black children are more frequently identified as children who have untreated cavities. When we think about the overall population breakdown, having this many Black children in comparison to this many white children in Alachua County might be considered a disparity. Looking at birth weight, healthy birth weight among children in Alachua County, we can see that in 2016, 17, and 2018, our percentage of healthy birth weight babies was lower than the statewide percentage. When we look at this by race, we see that the percentage of healthy birth weight babies among white families is higher than the percentage of healthy birth weight infants among Black or other racial and ethnic groups. Looking at prenatal care, Alachua County leads the state for the 3 years for which we have data, where we have a higher proportion of families who have adequate prenatal care as assessed by the Cuddle-Chuck Index. In our fetal deaths, in the deaths per 1,000 deliveries, we were higher than Florida in 2016, but looking forward to 2018, we were lower. Now I'll go into the other indicators that we have identified that relate to whether or not children are born and remain healthy in Alachua County. First is a larger version of the insured children. And I want to make sure that we remind the group that just because children have insurance doesn't necessarily mean they have access to healthcare. This is one component of access. It certainly speaks to the potential affordability of healthcare within Alachua County, but it doesn't necessarily mean that children are accessing or using that healthcare. Untreated cavities broken out by race that we've already shown before. Healthy birth rate, birth weight. Alachua County is lower than the state average. Healthy birth weight by race. we see that our white children are more frequently of a healthy birth weight than our African American percentage. Fetal deaths from 2016, 17, and 18. In 2016, we had more deaths per 1,000 deliveries, more fetal deaths per 1,000 deliveries. In 17, 18, that number has continued to decline. Sudden unexpected infant deaths. Alachua counties are considerably higher than the state of Florida rate across all 3 years. And while the overall rate has declined in 2018 since 2017, and it's lower than it was in 2016, it's still higher than the state. When we look at this broken out by race, we see that there is a important difference in the deaths per 1,000 live births among white versus Black and other babies. Our overall infant death rate per 1,000 births in Alachua County is higher across all 3 years that we're looking at these data. And as we can see, that Alachua County is in the 4th quartile in this performance indicator when compared to other counties in the state. On the opposite side, our student to nurse ratio in K-12 is considerably better than our state ratio, and our performance is in the 1st quartile. Births to teen mothers, when we look at our overall county rate, we are lower than our state rate. But if we break this down by race, we see that, again, there's a sizable disparity in the volume of births to teen mothers among Black and other races compared with white. Bacterial STDs in 2016 and 2018 were considerably higher than the state rate per 100,000 children in the population, and that is reflected in our 4th quartile of performance and bacterial STDs among 13 to 20-year-olds. And then when we break this down by race, we see a very large difference in the rate of children with bacterial STDs that are Black or other compared with children who are white. Looking at childhood obesity, we have 2 different reports. So when looking at our middle school obesity rates from 2016 and 18, we're in the 2nd quartile of performance. Looking at our high school obesity rates, we're in the 1st quartile. But if we look at these percentages, it's still fairly high percentage of kids in Alachua County, middle schoolers and high schoolers that are identified as obese. And our last 2 indicators relate to hospitalizations that relate to mental health among children ages 12 to 18. The first is self-inflicted injuries per 100,000 children in Alachua County. In 2018, we had 170, whereas the state rate per 100,000 was 70. That was a 2.42 times higher rate than the state of Florida. Hospitalizations for eating disorders. We're also considerably higher than the state in Alachua County, where we have 84.3 per 100,000 children, and the state of Florida had 37. This is 2.28 times higher than the state. Additional items that are on our data development agenda. Items have been included in the data development agenda either because we could not readily find access to data relating to these topics, or we're recommending new measures be developed, or whole surveys be distributed to individuals throughout the community to have a better understanding of the results that we're achieving for children and families in Alachua County. Specifically related to all children are born healthy and remain healthy, we think that it would be important to get some additional information about the extent to which children are able to regulate emotions and behavior. Pre-K children who can self-regulate and communicate their feelings or emotions. The number of children referred to mental health services and are able to access those services. Schools offering physical education. or a period of physical activity for all students. The extent to which young children are a healthy weight is that there was data and information about middle and high school students that we were able to access, but not younger than that, and whether or not physical activity is available to youth during out-of-school programs. Turning to our next results area, which is all children can learn what they need to be successful. Our dashboard items include graduation rates, utilization of the VPK program or the Voluntary Kindergarten Readiness Program, the percentage of children who are absent 21 or more days from school, which if you know 21 is more than a month's worth of school that children are absent from, as well as our FSA scores and comparisons by race and at 2 different levels of performance on the FSA assessment. Additional indicators include childcare accessibility, whether or not children are enrolled in the voluntary pre-kindergarten program, kindergarten readiness rates, our FSA for English language arts, mathematics, out-of-school suspensions, students absent, and high school graduation rates. I'm going to take a minute to explain this map briefly for folks, and this is drawn from the Florida Index of Childcare Access, which is a product that we've developed for the Office of Early Learning to understand the extent to which children who are enrolled in the Florida School Readiness Program are able to access high quality early care and education experiences using the school subsidy program. To briefly define the Florida School Readiness Program, as it is a means tested program to support access to quality care. To be eligible, families have to be under 150% of the federal poverty line and be either working or in school. Providers are voluntarily participate in this and must be legally operating providers, consent to ongoing quality monitoring visits from the Early Learning Coalition, and can be either home-based or center-based providers. As we look at the map, what we're showing is 2 different measures combined together in the color bands that we're seeing here. The first is selection, and selection measures the extent to which families are enrolling in high quality care if it's available to them within their zip code. Infrastructure looks at the overall capacity of high quality providers within each zip code. To be included in our infrastructure calculations or our selection calculations, providers have to be participating in the school readiness program, meaning they volunteer to serve children receiving child care subsidy. And they have to be providing quality services. And at this time point, it was quality was defined as being accredited or participating for this Gold Seal program. Future years, this analysis will include assessment from the classroom assessment scoring system. The dark blue areas of the map indicate that both selection is positive and infrastructure is positive. And so that indicates that we have ample supply of quality childcare for school readiness families and that families are enrolling in it at a high rate. The lighter greenish areas, selection is negative, but infrastructure is positive. And in those areas, we have ample infrastructure or ample supply to serve families, but families are not using that service in that area. The areas that are shaded yellow indicate that selection is high, but there is inadequate infrastructure to serve all the SR kids that are attempting to find care in that area. And so that there seems to be an ample demand for service reflected by parent selection or enrollment, but there's inadequate capacity to serve all the families that need it. And in the areas that are red, both selection and infrastructure are negative, which in all likelihood is driven by the fact that we have a very limited supply of high quality services in those areas that's limiting families' ability to enroll. The heat map or the kernel density clustering that you see above the map is showing the clustering of children who are receiving child care subsidy to attend care. And we've done this using the children's home address. So this is showing us where children live who are receiving school readiness services. The darker pink areas show more density. The lighter yellow represent a density, but not as dense as the pink areas. And then the areas that are transparent or clear on the map is showing that there is very little density in those areas and not enough to cluster to be represented in the map. As we look at this on the map, what we can see is that on the north and east side of Alachua County, we have inadequate infrastructure or a lack of supply of high quality providers. That is also seen here in this zip code. And in this green band, we're seeing that there's adequate infrastructure, but there's inadequate enrollment. So families are not choosing to enroll in high quality care in these areas in the county. We've added a bit of information to this map to provide some more context in interpreting this. And so that the little dots that you see on the map show the different types of providers that are operating throughout Alachua County. The blue dots indicate that it's a high quality provider or an accredited provider who is participating in the school readiness program. The pink dots illustrate providers that are accredited and they're providing high quality services, but are not enrolled and are not accepting subsidy in their programs. The black dots are providers that are enrolling children through the school readiness program, but are not considered to be high quality because they're not accredited and there's no other evidence that high quality services are being provided. The size of the dots relate to the number of children that the provider is able to serve. The large dots have a capacity of 70 or more. The small dots have a capacity of 69 or less. In looking at our, continuing the theme relating to access to quality early care and education experiences, when we look at our kindergarten readiness results for children in Alachua County, we are leading the state in having just under 60% of our children are performing on the kindergarten readiness assessment as being ready for school. But on the flip side of that, only less than 60% of the children in Alachua County are entering kindergarten with the skills deemed necessary to succeed based on the kindergarten readiness assessment in the state of Florida. Before we get into discussing the FSA results in Alachua County, I thought it important to pause for a minute to describe what the different levels of performance mean. So based on the Florida Department of Education guide on interpreting FSA performance, level 1 represents a child who is highly likely to need substantial support for the next grade or course. Level 2, the child is likely to need substantial support for the next grade or course. Level 3 indicates that the child may need additional support for the next grade. And level 4 indicates that the child will likely excel in the next grade. And level 5 is that the child is highly likely to excel in the next grade or course. And reporting in the state of Florida, we tend to use either level 3 or level 4 in reporting adequate performance on FSA. And I think that it's important for us to understand that level 3 performance indicates that the child may need additional support, but is technically passing the assessment. Level 4, the child is likely to excel and has the skills to perform more independently in their progression. So as we look at the 3rd grade FSA scores for English language arts by race at level 3, we see that our white and Asian students are performing at the top band here, right around that 80% performance level, whereas our Black students are performing and hovering down around 30% of children at the level 3 or above category. Moving over to level 4 and above, we see a similar pattern of disparity, but all of the children move down. And so that we are seeing at level 4, a smaller proportion of children across the board are achieving at that level or above, and we're still seeing some significant disparity in performance. We see the same story at 8th grade in our performance in English language arts and at 10th grade. So this is a problem that is enduring through children's time through the education system in Alachua County. We've also broken this out not only by race, but also by economic status, as defined by the Florida Department of Education as being economically disadvantaged or non-economically disadvantaged. And we can see At both levels 3 and levels 4, there is a significant disparity there as well. It's somewhat complicated to compare economic status without considering historical economic disadvantage that is also related to race. Mathematics performance in 3rd grade and in 8th grade is also desperate. But when we look at level 4 performance, we have many more children clustering towards the bottom of that performance level, with our Asian students almost hitting 20%, where our white and Hispanic students are lower, but still between that 10 and 20% band. And our African American students are just hovering above 0 there in 2018 and 19. Looking at out-of-school suspension rates, we are higher than the state average in the number of children suspended out of school per 100,000 kids across all years. And if we're looking across 2016, 2017, and 2018, the number of children receiving out-of-school suspension is actually increasing, and this appears to be going in the wrong direction. We did not have current data breaking out the racial background of children who are suspended out of school, but we're able to find some data from 2015 from the ed.gov Civil Rights Data Collection Center, and the pie chart on the left shows the district enrollment percentage, and then the pie chart on the right shows the breakdown of children who were referred for out-of-school suspensions. And as we can see, African American students represent only 35.7% of the district enrollment, but represent 69.5% of the children referred for out-of-school suspension. And then looking at our the percentage of students that are absent at 21 or more days, we were at around 13% in 2015-16, 16-17, that number dropped significantly and then bounced back up to just above 11% in 2017 and 18. Our high school graduation rate, we seem to have turned the curve going back from 2014-15. And we were below the state average. We were below in 15-16, and we were slightly above in 16-17, and have continued to be above the state average in 17-18 and 18-19. When we look at this breakdown by race in Alachua County, we see that the percentage of children that are graduating, or the percentage of graduates by race, we're right at 70% of African American students in 2018-19, and almost 100% of Asian students, and 93% of students, white students. Additional items on all children can learn what they need to be successful is we would like to get access to kindergarten readiness rates by race to see how those trajectories map with our performance once kids hit the elementary school. Social skill measures for elementary, middle, and high school children. Post-graduation outcomes reports for children in Alachua County, and also recommend some community-wide risk and resilience surveys, the Florida Tobacco Survey and the Florida Substance Abuse Survey, which are currently deployed but are not necessarily community-wide in Alachua County. Therefore, do not necessarily have representative findings. Turning to our next results area, all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships. That was a bit more difficult to identify positive indicators in the community, and have relied primarily on indicators that relate to maltreatment. It's of important note that when looking at the overall population of children in Alachua County, typically between 8 and 10% of Alachua County's children have some DCF involvement. Our first chart shows the number of children with allegations ranging from going from January 2017 through December 2019. As you can see, that it's highly variable through this time span. The children with non-substantiated reports is less, but also somewhat variable. And then the number of children with verified reports is not quite as variable, but we also have a much smaller number. It's important to keep in mind that, that children in non-substantiated reports is somewhat of a misnomer, and that it doesn't mean that there's nothing going on. It just means that during the DCF investigation, they didn't see any specific evidence to warrant a removal from a child's home or specific required state action. But in those instances that are captured here, the state has recommended actions that the family take, but they're not enforceable. When we break these indicators down by race, the first we're looking at non-substantiated child maltreatment reports. And as we look across, the blue color at the bottom is Black or African American, the orange is white or Caucasian, and then the gray is other or multiracial children. And we can see as we look at this that we have a lot of Black and white children that are within this band. If we look at the age grouping of children that are seen in the non-substantiated child maltreatment reports, we see that children between the ages of birth to 5 are more frequently seen. Children between the ages 16 to 12 are in the middle, and children between 13 and 17 are less frequently seen. Looking at verified maltreatment reports, we can see that they're considerably less than the not substantiated. And there's some variability. You can see there's a significant dip down here in February 2018. And early on, it looks like the African-American children were represented more frequently, but as we kind of tail out to the end of 2019, there are more white children reflected in these data. In verified maltreatment, we see a similar pattern by age group, in that our birth to 5-year-old children are more frequently seen, 6 to 12 are in the middle, and 13 to 17-year-old children are least frequently seen. Looking at the children in foster care per 100,000, we have more children in foster care each year than the state of Florida comparison, and are performing in the second quartile. And then if we look at births to mothers without a high school degree, among mothers that are 19 or older, we are lower than the state of Florida, with less than 10% each of the 3 years. But if we look at this breakout by race, we see that births to Black women without a high school degree is higher than births to white women. Some additional items that are on our data development agenda for this result area include children moving from in-home to out-of-home care, youth with incarcerated or court-involved families or parents, and children referred for behavioral problems or significant emotional distress. Our last area is that all children live in a safe community. We focus here on the number of children arrested per 10,000 between the ages of 10 to 17. In Alachua County, we are higher across all 3 years for which we're looking at these data. The violent crime rate per 100,000 in Alachua County is also higher in the state of Florida. And then we'll also talk about the social vulnerability index, and I'll provide some more explanation for that in just a moment. So when we look at youths arrested, 10 to 17, we see that Alachua County is higher than the state of Florida, and as of 2019, we were in the 4th quartile among counties. Our crime rate among index crimes is higher across all 3 years than the state of Florida. Rate per 100,000. Our violent crime rate is in the 4th quartile, as of 2018, and is higher across all 3 years. The Social Vulnerability Index refers to the resilience of communities when confronted by external stresses on human health, stresses such as natural or human-caused disasters or disease outbreaks. Reducing social vulnerability can decrease both human suffering and economic loss. CDC's Social Vulnerability Index uses 15 U.S. Census variables at the tract level to help local officials identify communities that may need support in preparing for hazards or recovering from a disaster. The Geospatial Research, Analysis and Services Program created and maintains CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. If you look at the graphic on the left-hand side, these are the 4 indices that are combined to result in the overall Social Vulnerability Index. Socioeconomic status looks at the proportion of folks within the census tract that are below poverty, unemployed, the median income, and the volume of individuals that do not have a high school diploma. Household composition and disability looks at the proportion that are 65 or older, 17 or younger, civilian with a disability, or single parent households. Minority status looks at minority and individuals that speak English less than well. Housing and transportation considers multi-unit structures, mobile homes, crowding, no vehicle, and group quarters. As we look at the Social Vulnerability Index in Alachua County, to orient you to the map here, the blue areas, or the areas where the index is lower, are more beneficial and less vulnerable. The areas with a higher number, or the darker red coloring, shows areas that have a higher vulnerability and are more vulnerable geographic areas. As we look at this, I'm sure that it's not going to be particularly surprising that our largest cluster of highly vulnerable census tracts are right here towards on the east side of city center, with some clustering on the just a little bit west of center, and then the areas around the edges of Alachua County on the north and east sides also have elevated vulnerabilities. Some other items that we've listed on our data developmental agenda relating to all children live in a safe community are the number of children in the adult justice system, the rate that children who are eligible for a citation or actually arrested, children arrested who are referred to a diversion program, and then also an accounting of Terry stops or walk and talks, which are where children are stopped by police under reasonable suspicion. And here's a reminder of the key insights that we identified. I'm not going to read these again, but wanted to have them close to the next steps that the committee is recommending. That the Children's Trust of Alachua County determine the priority results and key indicators as they relate to the Technical Advisory Committee insights, and that the Children's Trust of Alachua County commission a focused strengths and needs assessment to discover the story behind the data related to the key insights that we've shared, and that the strengths and needs assessment should include an appraisal of what is currently known about the result, community strength finding and community need finding, which should include the perspective of residents and community members in Alachua County relating to the results area, resource and network mapping to adequately account for the services that are currently available and the extent to which they're accessible and utilized. That will help to identify unmet needs and will lead to recommendations and guidance to the Children's Trust. That concludes my presentation. I don't know if we want to discuss questions or turn it over to the board for discussion.
Colin, we could probably talk about the results of this, the information for well into the night. But it's really, what do we do with the information now? And how do we want to assess what the next step is?
I think I am curious to see if any of the board members had any response before I make some suggestions. I think Dr. Hart has her hand up. Sorry. Lee, did you want to
Dr.
recognize Dr.
Hart?
Hart? Unmute yourself, Dr. Hart.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Herman, and thanks to the Technical Advisory Committee for, in such a short time, putting together a huge volume of information from all kinds of different sources. And I think we've all of us on this have seen these reports before, but I think the way you set it up is actually a much better format in terms of allowing us to prioritize things and see what important disparities we have. I did want to ask a question. Are you going to have this up on our website? Because I'm one of these people that likes to pore over data and rumble it around in my head a little bit before I make too many recommendations.
If that was for me, yes, we will have it up on a website and we'll send you a copy as well. So you can look at it all you want. There's some more hands. Let's see, Dr. Snyder, then Commissioner Cornell, and then Judge Bullard all have their hands up.
So I think,
Snyder?
yes, thank you. I think one of the important things that Herman mentioned at the end from the Technical Advisory Group's perspective is that it's very important, I think, for the trust to discuss whether they want to adopt the recommendations about the results areas that we are recommending. So I think in response to your question, Lee, about what the next steps are, I think that's a really important one. And then as Colin reminded us, trying to think about what are the key dashboard indicators. If the answer to that is yes, then what are some of the key indicators that we want to continue to have on the dashboard?
Commissioner Cornell has his hand up. Lee.
Commissioner Cornell, Ken?
Yeah, I didn't want to jump in. Dr. Hart, are you done? Okay.
Yes.
So like the chair, I think we could spend, and we probably need to spend, a significant amount of time on a number of these main slides. You know, one of the things that kind of popped out at me is we're below on every one of the indicators compared to the state on 3rd, 8th, 10th grade, but we're not below on graduation. So there's a pretty big disconnect there. You know, my questions from the last meeting were really focused on and let me back up by saying thank you to the Technical Advisory Board. I mean, the amount of data, I think our needs assessment is well established, and now the real rubber meets the road is how are we going to fund our priorities after we determine which are our most priorities. I think there's clearly not enough money to take care of it all, but I think this board needs to decide where do we want to really focus and leverage our partners and other community resources to get the biggest bang for the buck. And like Dr. Hart, I need to kind of absorb a lot of what I just heard, and I reviewed some of it in the backup, but hearing Herman kind of present it, you know, it's a lot more impactful, at least for me. And so I will be absolutely looking for recommendations from the experts, to Dr. Snyder's point, and seeing how we now allocate our budget to address these areas, not only in the coming year, but in the coming years. Because I think we know a lot of this data, but now it's time for us to act. And how this board decides to prioritize and act and then fund the programs to move the dial will be, you know, critical from my perspective. So thank you. And I'll try to listen a lot more to the experts on this board, because I'm going to be relying on you all. And you just need to say that right now out loud. You know, we've got incredible experts on this board that from my perspective, really, I need to hear from with regards to funding and how you believe funding can move the dial on some of these key metrics. Thank you, Chair.
And Judge Bullard has
Thank
his
you,
hand up.
Dr. Yeah, Judge Bullard?
Hi. I just, again, many thanks to the whole committee and to Dr. Knopf for this very helpful and comprehensive overview. You know, I guess I had just really more questions about how to move forward with all of this helpful information. And I certainly don't have any issue adopting the goals that are set forth in this assessment, this very comprehensive assessment, and that may be a starting point for the trust. But after adopting those, I guess the question is, then do we need, how do we put together the information related to the questions that I have? And, you know, what works, what do we have in the community now that addresses the issues? What programs are currently functioning? What programs have we funded? You know, and then I guess we have to figure that out before then we address the issue as what's missing. You know, where are the gaps? I mean, again, I think it clearly identifies the needs in the community and very well, very sufficiently. So do we, at this point, work with the executive director? Do we bring in a consultant to assist the executive director to answer those questions as far as what programs are currently in effect that are addressing these needs? You know, what's missing, and then ultimately evaluating the programs that we are funding that are addressing these needs. How are we measuring those outcomes? And do we have someone on board who is prepared to do that, or are we looking to hire a consultant to come in and measure outcomes? But maybe a starting point would be, again, just adopting these very well set forth goals established by this committee of experts as a first step in moving forward. And then ultimately being able to answer some questions that I get from people in the community. You know, what is going to be the procurement process based on this analysis, and what are some time frames? Are we going to set some time frames in terms of a process, so we can provide that guidance to the community who are evaluating the same information, and maybe have a program in place or a program in mind that will address these needs, and when will they be able to apply for that funding? So I guess I have, you know, again, a lot of gratitude to the committee for putting this information together, but some questions as far as how do we best move forward. And I guess my recommendation is maybe a starting point is adopting these goals that are set forth by this committee.
Well, Suzanne will be looking for a motion as soon as everybody's had a chance to ask their questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Labarda has her hand up.
Okay. Maggie?
If she had her hand up, I don't hear her. Am I missing something?
And Karen Cole Smith has her hand up too.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So often in the community, we don't want the community to get discouraged because we have, you know, lots of workshops, lots of reports, lots of committees, lots of task force. So I think it's important for the Children's Trust that whatever we're doing, you know, we're very clear on who is accountable and very specific about that. But more importantly, along with who's accountable for that, giving the community a timeline and meeting with that community, whether it's quarterly or every twice a year or whatever. But that timeline piece is very important because so often we lose trust. The community loses trust in leaders and organizations when we don't, you know, follow through. I think I hear people say very often, oh, we've had that discussion. We've talked about that before. We know what the data says. We keep hearing the same thing over and over again. So I think as we talk about this, and the report is excellent, that we move, I won't say overly swiftly, but that we moved very carefully and put together a piece that says, here's what we're going to do. Here's going to, who's going to be specifically accountable for it. Here's the timeline. Here's how we're going to measure and evaluate it, and give people an opportunity to speak out with any fear of, retribution or labeling or alienation because they feel a specific thing or a specific way about what we're doing.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Dr. Cole-Smith.
Mr. Chair, I think Dr. Hart has her hand up again, if I'm not mistaken.
Dr. Hart.
Okay, did we miss Maggie Labarda's comment? Because I saw her hand up a little bit earlier.
I cannot find Dr. Labarda. I think she has disappeared into the ether somewhere, but hopefully
Okay.
she'll come back.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to respond to something that Judge Bullard said. And first of all, I personally do not feel ready to vote on these recommendations because I haven't rolled around in the data enough to determine whether those recommendations reflect the opinions of the members of the trust. I mean, I just don't want to go too fast on what the recommendation should be. But the other thing that I noticed Judge Bullard saying is that there should be programs out there that respond to these needs that have been identified. And if I've learned one thing in the community, it's that programs do not fix disparities like this. You have to have systems change, which is why our Children's Services Advisory Council were very specific about not funding individual programs. We required the people that received the funding to show us that they intended to change a system. And I think we should do that with this money. We should figure out ways to create systems change. And I think, to Dr. Cole-Smith's point, that would be of great interest to the community. If we said, we're interested in creating this systems change, how does that sound to you in the community? And let the community say, yes, 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 that's exactly what we want or need. Or, oh no, don't change that system. We like that system. So I guess I'm suggesting a little bit of a different approach. And I can't say that I understood the difference between programs and systems change when I started doing community work. I didn't understand that. And I think that might be a worthwhile discussion for us to have. And Colin, I know you and I spent some time with Santa Fe College's groundwater group, where they actually talked a lot about the difference between programs and systems change. And I found that to be a really important message for the Children's Trust. And I hope we can find a way for all of us to participate in something like that groundwater.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I see Dr. Labarda is back. Did you want to speak?
I'm not sure whether in the time it took me to get back on the internet, where you've moved. I was going to say the first thing to me was back to what Dr. Snyder had said earlier, and Judge Bullard. We need to agree whether these are the 4 result areas and officially say, yes, these are the 4 areas that we think the trust should and could impact. And then where we go from there, once we look at all of these indicators, some of them are glaringly bad and should point to areas that would be where we want to look at a process of saying to the community, this is a systemic area that we think has significant problems. Is this an area? So that focuses any additional needs assessment on some really clear areas where we are either not doing badly or maybe even somewhere we are doing really well, to try and understand what it is that we've done that's successful, and does that have something to teach us about the other areas that are not doing so well. But I think first and foremost, we need to agree on, are these the areas, the result areas that make sense and that we as representatives of the community endorse. So I'm actually going to make that as a motion, that we accept the 4 result areas.
So
Motion.
you're making that motion officially? Maggie?
Yes,
Second,
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
second by Bullard.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So at this point, it would be discussion for board members as well as public. So let's do the board members first on the motion. Any board members?
I had my hand up.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Well, the motion was made, but I'm now trying to go back and find the 4 areas so I can look at them. And bear with me, if someone has them, if you have them, Colin, and can project them, that would help me. But I've heard the groundwater concept mentioned twice, and I'm glad to hear that. Because we know already the systemic issues. I think all of we have a lot of PhDs on this committee, a lot of well-educated people, and I'm not sure if they're saying they're not sure of the systemic issues that are negatively impacting along the racial line, racial and poverty line, or not. If that's where we're going, we're going to take a lot of time to really get out of a rut that we're in, I think, as a community. But I'm in agreement with the motion. I think in some areas we may need to have additional help by experts, so to speak, to kind of narrow down where we would go. But around, the first one, children are born healthy and remain healthy. I think that's where if I had to say we were slotted in a program, that's the newborn RN program. And if we don't think that if that program is going to change a system so that we have long-term implications and good outcome for children, we don't need to fund that in the next budget year. That's what I would say. If we're thinking we need to do a lot more studying on things and that all children can learn what they need to be successful. I had a question on the level 4. I was trying to have my question before the motion was made. So I'm not sure if Herman wants to chime in and kind of clarify to me why we were using level 4 proficiency versus level 3. I caught the tail end because sometimes the audio was kind of gobbled up for me. So I'm sorry about that. And I didn't want to interrupt his flow in there, so.
Sure. We didn't select level 4 over level 3. We presented both.
Mm-hmm.
Because they represent different, really different performance levels for children and their performance. And so we've shared both level 3
mm-hmm.
and level 4 in all of our FSA performance levels.
Mm-hmm.
And as you'll recall, the difference between level 3 and level 4 is that a student performing at level 3 may need additional support in the content area at the next grade. And level 4, the child is likely to excel in the next grade or course in that content area.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that clarification. And then member Commissioner Cornell made the mention that, which I had the same disconnect. We have great disparities along 3rd grade reading, 8th grade proficiency, as well as I think I saw some math in there as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have not much disparity in the graduation rates. And there is a disconnect there, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I think in the education area, I'm kind of along the lines of where we know that the school system needs help. And if there are providers that can help remediate students, we know this money can't go to the school district. I know that. So I think that we put out, we seek entities that would support young people along the line of remediating them so that we can get them caught up and they're on either level 3 or 4 for the FSA the first time, because all indicators and things that I've read, when students are not reading on grade level by grade 3, they hardly ever catch up. And Superintendent Clark is not on this call here now, but she gave me a statistic that was almost like my head almost exploded. So that's really critical. And then when the students get to 8th grade, if they're still not on grade level, that compounds more problems. And then there are all of these alternative assessments that the district kind of puts students in 10th through 12th grade so that they can try to get a standard diploma. But we're setting students up to leave our school system. The school system is doing this, not the trust, where when they go to Santa Fe they can't even get into UF. So we got to at least try to prepare them so that that they can at least go to Santa Fe or some school of that type and have some type of success in trying to get a skill or some type of post-secondary education so that they can take care of their families, because we all see now the economy we're in, the service jobs are not going to take care of their family. And then we would be, again, increasing or repeating the cycle of poverty with students born into poverty. So I am also that I don't want us to just kind of get paralyzed and where we're just studying and keep doing things. And I do think we need a needs assessment, but some of these things, a lot of folks have looked at them and the committee has tried to compress them down so we could move forward. So that's my discussion on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Anyone else, Colin?
Yes. It's Karen.
Dr. Cole-Smith?
Yes. In the entire report, under each of the areas, it talks about the importance of all the things that we want for our children. But could we consider adding a fifth statement that says we also want to reduce the gaps and disparities and inequities in each of the areas, because that was the central theme throughout the report. So is that a possibility of us adding a statement saying we also want to make sure that we reduce those gaps that we've talked about in this report? I'm not sure how we want to word it, but at least have it stated in some way, since that is one of the desires of the committee. Is that possible?
Mr. Chair, can
I would say anything's possible if there's a motion. So, Colin?
I was just wondering if I could make a recommendation specifically to what Dr. Cole-Smith said. One of the reasons for stating the results the way they are is because they say all children. So what we hope to do is infer eliminating all inequities through those, through those statements. When it comes to specific goals, we're not at the spot where ultimately what's supposed to happen is the trust is going to have to lock on some indicators that are going in the wrong direction, in our opinion. For example, maybe it is third grade reading. And then when it comes to setting targets on what kind of improvements we'd like to see in the communities and in the programs we fund, I would say at that point, setting specific targeted goals on improvements for programs in our community would where we would specifically address that. But the idea behind this, when we put this together to say all children, was our intent was to infer that all children meant no inequities. So.
Okay. Any other hands up, Colin?
Commissioner Cornell?
Kim?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. That's how I read the all children to member Karen. But I think we could also say that, I think we can say that in that sentence, but I'm ready to support the motion as far as the result area recommendations. But my comment is really focused on honing in what Dr. Hart said. And that is that I'm not as interested in funding certain specific programs. I'm much more interested in funding true systemic change, which then addresses the disparities that these results are showing us. And so that's where my kind of focus is on how do we fund systemic change to systems. I go back to what Ann Katurba said one of our first meetings, and she said it a number of other times, and then she stopped saying it because I think the community started to get frustrated, but changing the lake that our kids are swimming in so that they have a shot and that all kids have a shot and we eliminate these disparities. That's what I'm most interested in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone else, Colin?
I don't know if Dr. Hand put her hand up again or she just didn't take it down. I'm not sure.
Who?
So Dr. Hart, I would see if she had another comment. just to make sure she didn't put her hand up again. Dr. Hart?
Dr. Hart?
I guess not. I don't hear her.
Okay. Anyone
Oh,
else?
wait a minute.
She's muted.
Sorry, there's more than one place to push the unmute button. I thought I was unmuted. I just feel like these recommendations, these results recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee are written in such a way as to be very general. So if I remember the community, I would probably read those and go, yeah, right. How are we going to do that? Which is why I kind of want to consider rewording it a little bit to get at our intent to try to change systems or change the lake so that all the children swimming in the lake have the same chance of reaching the other side. And it kind of gets at Dr. Cole-Smith's recommendation to add a fifth. And I'm not really sure we have to add a fifth if we just change the language. So I don't think any of us have any problem with a selection of born healthy, remain healthy, when they need to be successful, supportive caregivers and relationships and safe community. That isn't my issue. My issue is how do we make it sound less like we're looking for a menu of programs which to tick some boxes in, because I don't think that's what we want to do. I think what we want to do is get these people who run successful programs to figure out how to collaborate in new ways and in that way change the lake. And I just want to give a little more thought to how to word this to respond to the disparities that we've seen. They're heartbreaking, they're persistent, and I think the Children's Trust is our grand opportunity to do something. That's just my comment. I kind of wish we could have another bit of time to rewrite these and persuade each other that it would be stronger language written another way.
They could be modified once they're adopted too. Don't forget that. This is a work in progress.
Dr. Snyder has her hand up, and Dr.
Before, Colin, may I interrupt?
Yes.
Colin, we've got a lot to go over on the agenda. So if we can kind of, wrap this discussion up and so that we can get on to other things, that would probably be good, because I personally don't think that this is just the first of many conversations, or at least major conversation that we're going to have. And I personally believe that as terrible as this system is as far as communicating, I think that we probably ought to dedicate a whole, a significant amount of time just to talk about, what we want to do, what these are the recommendations, what Dr. Hart's, what everybody is saying. And because this is the essence of what all this is about. And we really need to get it right as much as possible. And I think that we ought to just, nothing else on the agenda, just, take, probably 3 or 4 hours to dedicate to discussing this, because that's what I think it's going to take. And I know it's another meeting, but this is probably one of the most important things that we're going to do. So I know that we have a motion on there, but Colin, what were you going to recommend, Colin?
I was
well. Dr. Cole-Smith, I see you.
Yeah, and then Dr. Snyder also has her hand up, so I will speak either before they speak or after.
Let's go ahead and get who was first.
Dr. Snyder. Yeah, Dr. Snyder.
Dr.
And then
Snyder,
Dr. Cole-Smith.
Dr. Snyder, and then Dr. Cole-Smith.
Yep.
So I want to echo and agree with both what Nancy said about systems and thinking about this from a systems perspective, and what I and others have come to refer to as constructive disruption in existing systems. But I do think that if we think back to the slide that was shown at the very beginning of the presentation, I think we're on the results side of the conversation. And it's important for us to think about how we enact programs and the program performance measures that will feed into and help us elevate these results, the story behind the story, so to speak. And so I obviously was a member of the technical advisory group, but we struggled for a very, very long time to come to consensus around these 4 indicators, or these 4 results, I'm sorry. And I'm willing to support these with the understanding that what will follow behind them is much more in-depth discussion about how we procure programs to come together in an integrated way, how we focus priorities from a systemic perspective, et cetera. But I see these as sort of the guiding principles under which we would be operating as we're making those more difficult and having those more prolonged conversations about systems change.
And
Thank you, Dr. Cole-Smith.
And so speaking of systems change, I was thinking in terms of the 5th statement being short and saying something like, all children have equal access to educational programs and resources to ensure academic success. All children have equal access to educational programs and resources to ensure academic success, because all of the statements are indicating here's what we want for the children. We want them to be healthy. We want them to learn. We want them to have support. We want them to live in a safe community, and we want them to have equal access. So that was an example, and I just wanted to share that example with the group as a possibility for a 5th statement.
Okay, thank you.
I would, Dr. Cole-Smith, that could be added to number 2, and then what you said.
Dr. Labarta has her hand up.
So
Dr. Barta?
thank you. So my comment would be that, yeah, I think the equity issue is implicit in the all, but it could certainly be added as part of that. Children in Alachua County are effectively supported and have equitable access and to address disparities in all of these areas. Like, it could be incorporated very readily. I think it was clear from our discussions, and again, I too am on the committee, but I think that I really wanted to support what Dr. Snyder just said. I think when we really start to look at how we solicit programs, it's incumbent upon us at that point to write an RFP that points to system change as opposed to just one more service that we add to the community. That it requires people to have some understanding of the systemic issues that are contributing to the poor performance on the indicators that we target for that RFP. And I also wanted to support what our chair said, which is I think we need a day-long workshop where we don't have any business to conduct other than really we are both in terms of developing the trust, but more specifically in terms of how we develop our funding strategy and our procurement strategy. And I think that that has to happen sooner rather than later, given where we are in terms of budget and everything else. But I'm in support of the motion for these 4 areas. And if it's wordsmithing around making sure that the disparities are clearly part of what we're aiming for, because there are disparities in all of these areas, then I'm fine with that as well. But I think I'd like to call the question if that's okay.
Well, that would mean, and I don't know my parliamentary procedure as well as I should have. Do you have to vote on that as well?
I'm not sure either. I don't remember. I don't think so. I think that just happens, but we still need public input, and we haven't had that yet. But I don't think we're going to wordsmith this in the next half hour where we have other things to do.
Mr. Chair, from a procedural standpoint, calling the question requires a second, then you immediately move to a vote on calling the question.
Second.
And Lee, you're
Public
muted.
input. I don't like that. I don't like to have a public meeting and the public can't have input.
My second is with input, but moving forward with the input and a vote on the motion on the table.
And that was my position as well, not
Right.
to not have the public input.
Yes.
Well, you'd be voting to end debate is what you'd be voting on. You could
Lee?
allow public comment, but then you would move it immediately into a vote.
Yes.
That's fine. I just think the public should have some input. So
I agree.
if there's public that want to have input.
Absolutely.
How do you raise your hand? I don't want to do it right now. I just wondered.
I think it's in, is it in reactions?
I think we lost Lee. So if we just give him a minute to get back on.
Hey, Colin, can I ask a quick question for Dr. Cole Smith?
Hey,
Here, maybe.
I don't think you have it if you're not on the.
I'm here. I've been here.
I
Yeah,
have stuff
okay.
on-
Yes. Commissioner Cornell would like to ask Dr. Cole Smith a question.
If she could just repeat her words. I was
Oh.
trying to.
Okay.
All,
By
all,
your name.
all children have equal access
There it is. It's right there.
to educational programs and resources to ensure academic success. All children have equal access to educational programs and resources to ensure academic success.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. At this point, we're going to go.
I'm sorry.
No, we're not going to do that. Somebody asked to call the question. We're going to go ahead and do this.
No,
We're
there's
gonna vote
someone
on this.
trying to figure out how to raise their hand, and I wanted to ask the chair or Colin if he would let them know. I heard them kind of whispering while you were off, Lee. I don't have anything else to add. It's just they were saying they wanted to raise their hand, and they thought they had to be like on the board to raise their hand. And if you would just kind of give them instructions on how to do that so that they could be recognized.
Sure.
We
Let's
can
see.
recognize them right now if they just want to speak up, Lee.
Okay. All right. Okay. So if anybody wants to,
Miss
first of all, we're supposed to vote on this. Wait, we're going to do this the proper way. We got to vote for it, and then we'll get the input. So we got to do the roll call. Member certain. This is for calling the question.
Yes.
Member Clark is not here. Member Cole Smith.
Yes.
Member Cornell.
No.
Member Hart.
No.
Member Labarda.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
Member Twombly.
Yes.
Member Wilson Bullard.
Yes.
And no. So the motion passes. So at this point, we're going to take public input, not from the board members. So anybody from the public who would like to make comments on the motion, which is accepting the guidelines as presented during the presentation, this would be the time for y'all to give us your thoughts.
Lee, Miss Chisholm has her hand up.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I'd like to thank the committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to thank the committee as well. They did an excellent job. And I think everybody's brought up some very important things that we need to consider. And I just wanted to add that I'm looking and thinking in my mind about the root cause of the disparities. And there are going to have to be some systemic changes. And if we wanted to look at that as we decide on what to fund, as well as the groundwater approach, I think would assist in looking at systemic change in the root cause of a lot of the disparities, almost all of the disparities that we see in the report. I've gone to almost all of the groundwater workshops, and they are excellent. And in terms of making systemic changes, we're going to have to look at that piece, I believe. And thank you for allowing me to make a statement.
Thank you, Ms. Chisholm. We appreciate your input. Anyone else, Colin?
Yes, Mr. Logan and then Mr. Staples.
Hi, can I be heard?
Dr. Logan?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Please.
All right.
Yes.
Just to follow up on what some of the trust members brought up before, is that systemic change, it's become a word that, you know, we throw around a lot, but I do believe that that's where we need to be going with what we're trying to do here, or what you're trying to do here, is to look at some of the root causes, to attempt to create in the county a new system that addresses these issues in not in a piecemeal fashion. And even though certain things stand out, and I don't disagree with some of the comments that have been made, certain issues like reading level and so on stand out dramatically, but I don't think we ultimately make any big changes in any of those outcomes unless we create new systems in this county that can address those issues in a broader fashion than simply funding an additional tutoring program or such a thing as that. So that's just wanted to emphasize again the need to look at the county as a system and to look at the issues as systemic and not narrowly defined. And that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Logan, and thank you for all your help throughout this discussion from the get-go. And it is we, so it's everybody. So who's next, Colin?
Mr. Staples.
Mr. Staples?
Yeah, thank you for allowing public comment. Yeah, I applaud the efforts of the advisory committee, and I agree much of what has been communicated. I wanted to once again, I guess, ask for a timetable. I think this is, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think Judge Bullard and a few others brought up the point of a timetable. The response last time from the board was that the executive director, Colin has been following the process set out to him by the board. But to agree with Dr. Smith and Judge Bullard, from what we were told as of a year ago, as 6 months ago, is that a needs assessment would be done. So I'm wondering where the timetable is on the needs assessment. I was told that, and the community was told that this advisory committee was going to guide the needs assessment, and then that all of that would guide where the trust spends money on. And therefore, so I agree with a lot of what has been said, but I'll maybe restate my question is because as a representative of Boost, we're getting questioned, every week we're getting questioned, when is the money that we voted on and that you advocated for to get this thing passed, when is it going to be available to the community? And as Dr. Cole-Smith stated, trust is I'm afraid that trust is going to get started to get lost in the community, that we advocated for this thing, we campaigned for it. So I would like to know, I'm fine voting on this, but I also remember Boost making a recommendation that the Weichert Center or the Youth Forum also be the consultant on work like this to guide this needs assessment and to guide these things that are being brought up, so that professionals that go around the country guiding these types of funding initiatives can give professional advice on how to disperse money. So again, can we get timetables on the process and get a clear definition of the process? We can clearly communicate that to the community when asked. Thank you.
I would say that's probably one of the things that we need to discuss if we do this workshop. I think that's an important part of the discussion, how we go forward. But I think it's we're going to be hard pressed to give any sort of time certain. Colin might be able to address how the needs assessment is going, but we want to do this right, and just as a measure of what it took in the past. It took the Child Service Advisory Committee, probably a year and a half to get everything, to submit the 3 programs to the county. And Dr. Logan, if that's incorrect, you can correct me, but it took a while. And when you're talking about systemic changes, most likely we're talking about creating programs, and it's just not going to be a quick process. And Lord knows, we want to maintain the trust, but I think part of this is, if you want to maintain the trust, you're going to have to see results. And if we just throw money at something, I don't know that necessarily will help. So, it's complicated, and it's probably going to take a while. So, but I think that it is imperative to have that discussion when we talk about the results and how we implement it and what the next steps are.
And Mr.
Colin, is there
Chair,
anybody else?
one Sherry Kitchens would like to
Mr.
speak. Dr. Kitchens, Sherry Kitchens would like to speak.
Dr.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sherry Kitchens. I'm with the Child Advocacy Center. I was able to attend many of the technical data review committee meetings. It was an outstanding group of folks that pulled together a lot of data. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting, or I heard them talking about, was the complexity of the needs, complexity of the issues that children in our area are facing. But the data doesn't necessarily reflect those overlaps. And I think there are some overlaps in children who are getting in trouble, and children who are having difficulty in school, and children who have had adverse childhood experiences in their first 5 years, which is that groundwork, as we all know, to children being able to be successful in school. And so I think there's data that could be helpful, including being able to do some adverse childhood experiences surveys across larger groups of children to be able to gather that information. If you've got, let's even say 50% of the children had a significant number of adverse childhood experiences, and we're just focusing on their academic success and not addressing some of that trauma that they've experienced, we don't even know how much trauma the children in our community have experienced because we haven't ever assessed it. So I agree with Dr. Hart, and then I feel like there's a lot more working with this data and more data to be gathered, and with Mr. Staples from the standpoint of a needs assessment is important, and we've identified a lot of needs. But when we talk about changing systems, we need to do some systems mapping. We need a better idea of how these systems overlap and cross, and children that kind of fall into multiple areas of needs, because it would give us a better picture of what we're dealing with. I don't feel like we still have our arms around the whole of the challenges, so that things could be designed to help children in our community. So I appreciate that this isn't easy for all of you. I appreciate that you're willing to even take on the task, but I think there's some complexity that we just don't have the information on yet. And I think more assessment needs to be done. A deeper kind of assessment needs to be done. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sherry. Anyone else, Colin?
I don't see anybody else.
Okay. Judge Bullard, may I ask you a question? The motion is that we accept the recommendations. Would you, and I don't know whether Colin would be the best person to give some input, but what's the next step? I mean, is this we accept it and then we're going to work to have a workshop, or it can be another motion? But if it was included in this motion, it would be great.
I have an addendum to include.
I would recommend.
I was going to make another motion after we adopted this. So what I've written and
okay, all right, that's good.
Do you want me to make another motion, or see if Maggie wants to adopt this amendment?
I thought we already voted on that motion.
Why don't we see? Why don't you go and see if the judge is willing to adopt it?
I thought we voted on the other motion, so it would be a separate motion, would it not?
We voted to end the
No,
date.
what we voted on before was to call the question.
And so this was actually Maggie's motion.
So what wanted to amend the motion to say?
So what I would say, Maggie,
So Ken, how did you want?
what I was going to say
Yeah.
to address Chair Pinkerton was that the second part of the motion, after if we pass this results recommendation, would be that we schedule a workshop to address the funding priorities to develop and implement, and I like Dr. Schneider's phrase, develop and implement constructive disruption in existing systems to address the adopted Technical Advisory Committee result area recommendations.
I'm fine with that as an amendment to my motion.
That would be
Second,
direction.
you're okay with it?
That would be direction that that Collins schedule a workshop to kind of address what Addison and some of the other folks, you know, what's the next step.
It's an acceptable amendment to my motion. So Judge Bullard, it's up to you whether you find it an acceptable amendment.
I think it is. I would like to hear from Colin. I'd like his input on the issue first.
Okay. Colin?
I agree that you should accept the 4 results areas as written. That does not discount Dr. Cole's suggestion. I just think it comes later. One of the things I would cover in the workshop is the framework of a results-based accountability model. It's clear to me that we don't yet understand it, and that's my fault. So that would probably be the first part of the workshop, because what it's designed to do is get us relatively quickly from what would the world look like if it was perfect to children to what is the children's trust role. And there's a few more steps, but it should get us there pretty quickly. I think we have a lot of data. This is just, I'm just gonna opine here a little bit. You can always have more data, always. That's not an excuse not to act. And we know a lot about the community already. We've learned over the last few months, just in the Technical Advisory Committee, that combined with a whole folder of needs assessments and reports that, you know, various people have combed through. So I don't think we're really that far along from recommending some specific strategies to address certain indicators, but you have to pick some indicators that are not, that you really want to focus on to try to turn in a community. And by doing that, that recognizes that 3rd grade reading is not just the responsibility of one system. Our newborn home visiting program, because of what we know about brain science, impacts 3rd grade reading. Summer programs, it's been documented since the 70s, the summer is a big cause of disparities in academic outcomes, especially with reading. After school programs can address all these things. So, and if kids are traumatized or in the child welfare system, it's going to affect their ability to read in 3rd grade. So by adopting these results and focusing in on some indicators, the whole point of the process is that it takes multiple systems to address these. So the next step would be is once we decide which data points in the community we want to start going in the right direction, that we then, the point of the needs assessment is to ask the questions of what works to do that. You know, what do we have in our community and what's missing? And our university partners can be especially helpful when it comes to surveying the literature and what are the best practices and what's going on in other parts of the country. So that's a high level overview of what I think what's next, but I think we have a lot of data. I don't think we're far off. And I think pretty soon we'll be able to have some recommendations. So I suggest that you all support these 4 results as written.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead with the motion to accept the 4 parameters given and that we work on scheduling a workshop. So Member Surton.
Aye.
Member Cole Smith. Member Cornell.
Aye.
Member Hart.
Aye.
Member Labarga.
Aye.
Member Snyder,
Aye.
Member Twombly,
Aye.
Member Wilson Bullard,
Aye.
and aye. So the motion is unanimous. Thank you all. And it's really a huge shout out to all the people involved in bringing us all this data, collecting it, you know, the countless hours you spent on it. Herman for presenting it to us. We can't thank you all enough for what you've done and what you will do in the future. So thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Okay, the next item would be the budget discussion. Colin?
Yes, I have shared my screen. Just confirm that all of you can see it, and I will do this quickly. I see some people nodding their heads. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, I've switched the screen. So I'm going to quickly jump to the numbers. I included a description and some explanations in the packet. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, but I'm going to quickly move towards the numbers and make sure that everybody can view the screen. So give me just a second. Okay, and let me zoom it here. And this, I don't think this will take long at all, but you never know. Okay, that might be too big, but we'll see how this goes. The direction I was given was to put together a budget that assumes a $500,000 and go from there. So the, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to move all of you around so I can actually see what's on my screen while I'm talking. I apologize. Okay. So that's what this budget does. And the taxable value that I used was a guesstimate from the county, but as it turns out, it's awfully, awfully close. I received the numbers today or late last week from the property appraiser, and it's almost identical to the county's estimate. So bravo to the county. The assumptions then is after we tax a $500,000 that we'd levy a tax of $8 million, but we usually budget for collecting 95% of that. So net of $8 million is and change is where we get our $7.6 million worth of revenue. Added on top of that is a carry forward of all of the contracts that were awarded this year, and a fund balance, which simply means the leftover money between the revenues and expenditures for this year and all the preceding years, of which we haven't had any yet, but of about $3 million, and some miscellaneous revenue. We have just over 12.1 million, almost $12.2 million to work with. So that is the revenue side. Are there any questions there, or should I just go ahead and keep going?
Any questions?
Yeah, and I'm having trouble all of a sudden seeing everybody, so speak up if you have any. I'm just going to keep going then. When we get down to this is a draft, so by the time this is presented next week, expect it to look just a bit different. But in general, there's going to be two sections: our program services or human services bucket of expenditures and our general government expenditures. So on the program services side, there's the top section is grants to organizations. So the renewals for the 3 programs that carried over from the Community Services Advisory Board is the first number. The carryover number is the middle number. And then what's left is about 4.7, almost 4.8 million in future program allocations. Now, when I said that I think we could start having some opportunities for some funding pretty quickly once the fiscal year turns over, I do suggest, and this is after talking with several of you one-on-one, that we can have some smaller buckets around match funding, capacity building, and what we'll call innovation funding. So once you decide your priorities, it may be that there is some agencies trying to draw down some, let's say a federal grant that addresses a gap in the system where they need some local match. That's what I envision the match funding bucket to be. The capacity building bucket would be on, I would say professional development for people that provide services to children would be the most concise way to explain it. So I would consider a large portion of the funding, for example, from the Transformational Professional Development Program to be a capacity building initiative. So this would be additional funding towards capacity building. And then innovation funding is what I would call small grant funding. So programs that you know, either just don't have the capacity yet to carry out large grants from government entities like us, but they are perfectly able to carry out smaller programs, and it's more appropriate that they kind of compete in the set-aside bucket and not compete against very, very large agencies or other government entities. So those would be three opportunities where we could very quickly develop some procurement policies around and get some funding out pretty quickly once the fiscal year turns. So the rest of the program or human services side of the budget is on is things that support those activities, some personnel, a management information system around collecting data to measure outcomes, and then setting aside some additional funding if we need some professional or consulting services. And all of that represents 89% of the budget. The rest of the budget is just what it takes to run the agency. And so, again, some personal services to perform general government services, and a myriad of what we would call overhead expenditures. At the very bottom, you know, we do pay some collection fees to the property appraiser and the tax collector. What I thought might be helpful is on a few of these items where you got to see how these numbers were derived, specifically around the both the programs and the personnel services. So on the program side, what I've simply done is, I think it was Commissioner Cornell last meeting asked about priorities and you know, what should our priorities be, or how much are we spending in these suggested priority areas or something along those lines. So I took my best guess to give you the trust a snapshot of where we are now between the renewal programs and the carry forward programs. And so at a sum total, you'll see at the bottom of kind of how the funding breaks out amongst the four result areas. Some of these programs, again, it's not cut and dry. They impact multiple results. So you could categorize them differently, but this is just, you know, my best guess.
Quick question, please.
Yes.
So is the idea there, Colin, that you've got those two line items carried forward, and then the new programming, and so whether everyone finishes a grant or just gets carried forward, it's funded up above in the spreadsheet. Is that the idea?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So
That's
that 1.556 number and 1.193, those numbers up above are collectively 2.7, and that's the and so for this preliminary point, it doesn't matter if they're all funded or not, because they're just going to be carried forward, presumably, unless they're not fulfilling what their grant says.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the deadline, some of them may not even want to carry forward. The deadline for that is August 3rd, so we still have some time. Yeah, that could change between now and September. The other area, one of the limiting factors on how fast we give out money is the staff that I have. And it takes staff to give out government funds in a way that, you know, assures that the activities carry out are what you desire, but also assures the public that there's a proper accountability and oversight, and assures the vendors and providers that everything's being done in a fair manner. So I am going to redo this spreadsheet or this diagram here between now and the 15th, because I'm going to include also the myriad of services that we're contracting with interlocal agreements and private contractors to provide. So there's actually a lot more that needs to happen than is even captured here. But what I have captured here is funding specifically that what I'm going to ask the trust to support and include in the budget. The boxes in blue are what I would consider general government activities, overhead activities, and activities that are pretty much happening now, but happening somewhere else, and they need to begin at some point to transition over to the trust. And so that includes me, an executive assistant, which we're narrowing that down, Jennifer, and then a fiscal assistant, which is on the agenda, and then a box of either communications or an engagement coordinator over here. And so those go in the general government category. And then to support programs, all of those are in green. And really, with the exception of Cindy Bishop, who has been a real trooper at Community Support Services, helping get these contracts negotiated. Aside from that, none of the rest of these activities are really happening yet. And so these would be, these directly support the program services activities, and they're in green. So when you add it all up, that is a total of 9 positions, which is more than has been discussed in the past. But if you'll notice in the information section, I did include some information on some of our other trusts, just so you got to get a feel that even with our size, this is still pretty lean. So that is a general overview of the budget. Again, at the end of the year, if you go up, you'll see that the anticipated fund balance is still larger than 3 million. We'll still have some leftover funds, and it may be appropriate in January. According to the bylaws, the trust is supposed to have a little bit longer meeting or workshop to pick new members and discuss the upcoming year. And maybe we'll have a better idea of what the the tax rate will look like for the next year. But as of this year, still, we don't anticipate spending everything and giving ourselves some cushion for what lies forward. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Colin?
Yes, and I'm having trouble seeing people. I've done something here, so please go ahead and just speak up until I can fix it. That's Judge Bullard. Judge Bullard, yeah. Judge Bullard's hand is up, but she's muted.
Okay, Judge.
You think I'd have this down by now. All right, so thank you again for a terrific report, Colin. I do have a question. Under program services, you've indicated that these are all positions that have not been filled, but are, I mean, clearly they're necessary. And then you also mentioned that by August that these programs will be potentially reapplying for funding. How are you able to, I can't imagine you can do this all on your own with everything else you're taking on. How are these programs, how are they going to be evaluated? Or do you need us to do something to set in motion the hiring of these particular positions to provide that necessary support?
There's a lot of questions there. So first of all, in August, that is not a reapplication. That is a request for the programs that were funded back in March to extend their contracts, because many of them will have unspent dollars through the next year. And that is a very easy process and a very easy thing just to amend. So that's question one. Question two is about people I've hired. I only have 2 people hired right now, and that's me and Jennifer, and I would say 2 more in the pipeline. The rest of the people, you're right, they're not on yet. The priority will be the program services manager. That's the next priority. And as I have learned, because there's no manual on how to start a brand new agency of the government, hiring has been just a tad bit difficult for no reason of people, but just the reason, because the best infrastructure we have is the county, and they're much more complex than we need to be. So with the help of Heather Ackman just today, she connected me with a consultant that's going to help us simplify job descriptions and classifications and hopefully move things along a little bit quicker. And the plan is come October 1st, we will absorb all of those activities and do our own hiring. And we'll have a human resources company like a Paychex or an ADP or something like that to advertise and help us. So setting all of that up is not something I predicted when I wrote my 90-day plan going through and interviewing, but we're making progress every day.
So do you need anything specific from the trust in order to move forward?
The only thing I need from the trust is you're going to get, there's an action item about a budget transfer coming up pretty quickly, and I need you to support that because technically to pay the rest of these employees, you don't have any employees. We're technically county employees, so we need to get the money in the right place. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Colin.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Dr. Goldsmith?
Yes, I mentioned this briefly at one of the earlier meetings about the possibility of having a community outreach specialist. I tend to see that as a little bit different, or maybe a lot different than the communications and engagement coordinator. That outreach specialist would be the person who's very familiar with the life experiences of the diverse groups in the community. That person would be the person who would keep their ear to the ground and stay in touch with the voices of the special populations in the community, especially those persons that are disproportionately underserved and underrepresented. That person would be very knowledgeable of the community and knowledgeable about the various community resources, and would essentially be identified as an ongoing liaison with neighborhood associations, low-income housing developments, etc. That person would be often described as an advocate to some degree of the persons that will benefit from the services that are provided through the Children's Trust. That person would be visible at many of the meetings and gatherings that are aligned with the mission and the goals of the Children's Trust. And so I see that particular position as different from the community and engagement coordinator. Not totally different, but I see more the communications and engagement coordinator as the person who writes the newsletter and the reports, who manages the social media presence, who manages the website presence and documentation of the progress of the Children's Trust, who may work toward helping to create marketing strategies and help to prepare presentations. So I'm hopeful that we will consider having another box there, another position of the Children's Trust outreach specialist.
Thank you, Dr. Goldsmith. Any other comments?
Dr. Labarta has her hand up.
Dr. Labarta?
Thank you. So I guess my question is, given the way the structure of approvals go, do you need approval to hire this configuration plus an outreach person if that, because I tend to agree with Dr. Goldsmith on that. So I'm asking, do you need approval for this staffing pattern in order to move forward to hire the positions?
What I had put in the chairman's notes when it came to this is that what I'm looking for from the trust is what to prepare for the tentative budget to go to the county commission with the millage rate. We're going to go the half mill or roll it back, and then with whatever changes to what I've given you here today to include in the final budget that you ultimately will pass in September. I don't think I'm going to give the Board of County Commission this level of detail. So if you would like me to budget in a 10th position, I can do that, and include that in the agenda for the items next week.
Yeah, I just want to be clear because I don't want to do anything that delays you hiring. I think these positions are critical. I also agree with the outreach position. So I don't know, based on the county and the requirements, legal requirements, whether you need that to be a formal motion even at this early point or not until the budget comes to us to approve these positions. I just want to make sure you leave here with whatever you need to move forward.
I think based on, you know, I can put that in the budget and as a line item and show you where it will go. And then next week you can go ahead and approve that. I'm not asking for you to approve all of these positions, really, an official org chart until you approve the budget in September. And I'm not going to be able to hire them all right away anyways. My next priority is the program services person, and I've got some work to do on, you know, just some classification of positions and all of that. But certainly come October 1, we should be ready to start doing that. So I would say I will prepare the numbers and the official authority for all these positions. We can wait till September. And as they come
Motion
up,
Colin's looking for is to direct the executive director to prepare a tentative budget for approval at the June 15th meeting at whatever millage rate it's going to be. So if somebody wants to make that motion, they can.
and Mr. Chair, I would say that in the motion, if they'd want me to include it with whatever changes, another position and all of that, that would be part of the motion as well. And I would prepare it with all those changes, whatever the board tells me to do.
So move it.
Okay.
This is certain.
Second, that's Hart.
Okay. So we had a motion and a second. Any further board discussion? If not, we'll turn it to the public.
I don't see any other hands.
Okay. All right. Then we'll have a vote. Member Certain?
Yes.
And I apologize. I didn't hear what the millage rate was. Was that included in the motion?
I actually, well, I didn't say the millage rate. I just moved what Colin had said. So I would move that he prepare the budget at the half meal. That was what I had recommended in our last meeting. So with the additional position that to include in the budget, also the position that was just suggested by member Cole Smith, I'm sorry.
And Mr. Chair, just for my clarification.
How do you vote for it?
I vote for you. I said yes. I'm sorry. Certain.
Okay. Colin, did you need something?
Well, my question was, when I said there were no hands up, that was for trust members. I wasn't sure. I don't see any hands up for public comment, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to call for any public comment or not.
I did ask for that.
Okay, yeah.
Member Cole Smith?
Yes.
Member Cornell?
Yes.
Member Hart?
Yes.
Member Labarda?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Yes.
Member Twombly?
Yes.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Yes.
Member Pinkston says no.
Leah,
Next item would be the, beg pardon?
I was just going to say, Leah, I was just going to say that I enjoyed watching you ask for the millage recommendation again after we added a position.
What'd you say, Ken? I didn't hear you.
Yes.
He knows what I said.
Oh.
Okay, now the next item is First Amendment to the Interlocutor Agreement. Colin?
Yes, pretty much you authorized me to renegotiate it. I gave a
Move
bunch
staff recommendation.
Thank you, Ken. Any second?
Tina?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion from members, board members, or the public? Colin? Nobody?
I don't see any.
Okay. Member Certain?
Yes, aye.
Member Cole Smith?
Aye.
Member Cornell,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
Member Lombardo,
Aye.
Member Snyder,
Aye.
Member Twombly,
Aye.
Member Wilson Bullard,
Aye.
and I. So that's unanimous. The next item
Move staff recommendation.
is, I'm trying to see what it is.
Reclassing personnel.
It's actually,
Authorize and advertise and hire a fiscal assistant.
Oh, that one too.
it's actually a budget.
Okay.
Budget amendment is next, but
I'm sorry, Colin, can you repeat that?
yeah, the next one is the budget amendment. We're transferring 500,000.
Okay. Okay. All right, need a motion?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion from board members or the public?
Yes.
Colin, see anybody?
Yes.
Said yes.
Uh,
I don't see.
Dr. Hart?
Yes. I just want to
Dr. Hart?
clarify, can you guys hear me? We
Yes.
are talking about personnel services, not personal services. Am I correct?
Yes.
Colin?
Yes.
There's a misspelling on the title of the budget amendment. I just want to make sure that we don't pass an amendment that's got a grammatical error in it.
Labor is often referred to as
Okay.
personal services in government. I thought that.
Oh, okay. Then that's something I didn't know.
Yeah, that's how I've always seen it in government contracts, and it's always struck me as odd.
Personal service. It's personal, okay?
Is that housekeeper? What is it?
I just thought
Okay, any
maybe he
further
had a
questions,
personal
comments?
assistant, you know?
All right. Member Surgeon?
Aye.
Member Cole Smith?
Aye.
Member Cornell?
Aye.
Member Hart?
Aye.
Member Labarda?
Aye.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Twombly?
Aye.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Aye.
And I. Okay? And the next one that I believe is the authorization to advertise hiring a fiscal assistant.
So moved.
Okay. That a
Second.
motion, Kim? Okay, we have a motion, a second. Do we have any discussion from board members or the public? You see anyone, Colin?
No, I'm not.
Okay, member Certain? What?
Yes, aye.
Is that a yes or a no?
Aye. I'm trying to say yes.
Okay. Member Cole Smith?
Aye.
Okay, good job. Member Cornell?
Aye.
Member Hart?
Aye.
Member Labarda? Member Labarda?
I'm looking for.
Sorry.
Member
Aye.
Snyder?
Yeah, she said aye.
Aye.
Member Twombly?
Aye.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Aye.
And aye. Okay, the next one is a contract amendment for the social and emotional development program. Any, Colin, you want to explain this or someone make a motion?
Move staff recommendation on this one too.
Have a motion, do we have a second? Do we have a second? Am I just not hearing a second?
I don't hear one.
Okay. All right. We need a second if this is going to go through. So, I'm sorry.
Can I get a little bit more explanation on that? I missed this in my packet, so I apologize. That's why I was trying to scan this right now. So
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Colin, you want to go ahead and discuss this?
Yes. So the social and emotional development program is the program that has mental health counselors working with teachers and early learning centers
right.
on how to manage children's behavior, combined with family support facilitators to work with the families while their children are at school and directly in the home. And with the outbreak of COVID and the reduction of kids, not as many kids were showing up into centers and just all of the changes, what happened is that one is that within this contract there is budgeted items for what's called incidentals or rent, food, clothing, things to take care of immediate needs to stabilize families. And they asked to transfer some money around to provide some more money there, which last meeting you gave me the authority to do, so I felt pretty comfortable with okaying that. But the other thing they noticed is that as they were going into homes and not as many kids going into centers and they had a little bit more capacity, what they're finding is that obviously these children have siblings and who also need some help as well. And they wanted permission essentially with the mental health counselors to expand their scope to serve those kids as well. And I think
in other words, it went from 0 to 5 to 0 to 18.
Okay, I can second that. I'm okay with that. I couldn't second it because I was trying to scan it. Thank you for allowing me that time for that.
Okay.
I don't know how I missed that.
Thank you for seconding it. Any discussion from board members or the public? Colin, you see anybody?
I'm looking, but I do not see anybody.
Okay. Member Certain?
Aye.
Member Cole Smith?
Aye.
Member Cornell?
Aye.
Member Hart?
Aye.
Member Labarda?
Since I was part of developing this, I think it's appropriate for me to abstain.
I don't know if you can, Maggie.
You have no financial on this, so.
Then I would.
Do you?
Yeah, I just, with that disclosure that I was part of developing this proposal back when. So, but yes.
Okay. Okay. Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Twombly?
Aye.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Aye.
And aye. Okay, motion's unanimous. The next item is for information only. So unless anybody has any questions or comments about those 5 items, we'll just move on. Do you see anything, Colin?
Nope.
Okay. All right. At this point, anybody from the public who would like to give us your input, this would be the time to do it. Colin, you see anybody?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. Any members of the board have anything?
I just have one thing, Lee.
Okay.
Good meeting, great discussion. I just wanted to note for some of the other members that are new to the board that, I don't ever remember going 20 minutes over when I was the chair. And I just wanted y'all to hear that.
Oh, get out of here.
And actually,
See, Lee hasn't smiled the whole meeting.
Some of those meetings, wait a minute, Ken. Some of those, that one or two meetings went to like 7:30.
But I at least told everybody we were going late, okay? Just kidding.
Hey, I hope you have a wonderful trip home, man. Okay, this meeting is officially adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
and still soda.